Chapter 31. Qi circulation completed. Like a robust python, the qi force rapidly weaved through his body. Even though it was his first execution, the abundant memories in his mind were as if he had been immersed in this path for decades. The moment his body mobilized the qi force, he entered a state of innate, instinctive action. Faint rumbles of thunder seemed to sound within his meridians. A major channel was opened by the penetrating qi force. With the major channel opened, the qi force flowed unobstructed, zipping back and forth within it, completing 16 circulation cycles in a single breath. Then, Li Hao executed the move for a second time, this time with even greater proficiency, his body gradually synchronizing with his memory in a single breath. 38 circulation cycles, the third time, 52 cycles in a single breath. The fourth time, the fifth time, until after the seventh time he reached 100 cycles in a single breath. The 100 Jiao body is also called the 100-cycle body because, when cultivated to great accomplishment, it could reach exactly 100 circulation cycles, no more, no less. At this moment, Li Hao glanced at his panel and saw that his cultivation level was no longer at the 10th layer of Power Passage Realm but had entered the Zhou Tian realm, the first layer. Having officially stepped into the Zhou Tian realm, Li Hao felt the qi force surging and tumbling in this major channel, brimming with tension. Compared to before, it was like his body had suddenly grown an extra spine and he stood upright with every movement. He could casually circulate his qi, unleashing far greater strength than before. As Li Hao felt a sense of joy in his heart, he then proceeded to execute the primordial technique. According to the memories of practice, he would refine from the second layer, the starry body, to the third layer, the mystic vein body. With practice, the qi force inside Li Hao's body became even more wild and furious, like the raging waves of a great river. Li Hao discovered that the mystic vein body also contained a qi circulation skill not inferior at all to the 100 Jiao body, and even more terrifying. Li Muxiu didn't tell him about this, mostly because the old man had not deeply researched this martial art. After all, it was about body refinement, and it was also an incomplete text. The old man probably hadn't considered letting Li Hao cultivate it. As Li Hao practiced it again and again, he became familiar with it, and his body underwent a tremendous change, slowly opening up a second major channel. This channel was extremely thick and robust, capable of accommodating far more qi force than the first channel. This channel was the core of the mystic vein body, the mystic vein. Through the description in the cultivation technique, Li Hao knew that in martial arts, this mystic vein had another name, the Great Yin channel. Li Hao looked at his cultivation level and saw that even though he had opened a second major channel, he was still at the first layer of the Zhou Tian realm with no advancement. This Great Yin channel was like a hidden vein, not included in the count of other major channels. The 100 Jiao qi force originally in the first major channel also began to flow into the Great Yin channel, circulating back and forth between the two. Yet, the qi force that almost filled the first channel felt like a small stream inside the Great Yin channel, scarcely able to collide and churn against the walls of the channel. Sounds like thundering rolls and tiger roars emanated from within Li Hao's body, as if a dormant beast was slowly awakening and opening its eyes. The external force emanating from his rampaging qi force scattered the dust around his body, leaving no speck of dust within 3 feet. The insights into the initial stage of the physical body path's third level granted Li Hao a profound understanding of both cultivation techniques, allowing him to immediately feel that the qi circulation skills of both techniques overlapped and intertwined. With a thought, he executed both techniques simultaneously, and quickly the two qi circulation skills began to interact. The qi force split into 2 streams, chasing each other like twin dragons within his major channels. As Li Hao practiced more and grew more familiar, the 2 streams of qi force began to intertwine and merge. This was the mutual integration of cultivation techniques. The overlapping parts were merged, and the intersecting areas became one. As a result, his qi force circulated even faster. From 100 cycles in a channel, he reached 132 cycles. This was an increase of 32 circulation cycles. This achievement had already surpassed the Li family's top-tier qi circulation skill. The 100 Battle Cycle Heaven Skill 1 should know that aside from the royal family, this was one of the top-tier qi circulation skills within Daiyu, coveted and sought after by martial artists the world over at this moment. With the qi force roaming the Great Yin channel, Li Hao realized that there was a special, extremely yin and cold force flowing through his body, should he practice certain techniques. Like the cold ice palm or ice soul body, he would achieve twice the results with half the effort. After completing his practice session, Li Hao planned to look up what this Great Yin channel was. However, He continued to practice the third top-tier body refinement skill, the Dragon Cicada Void Body. However, compared to the first two, the third layer of this technique was slightly inferior. The flying phase, which also contained a chi circulation skill, only had 72 cycles. In other words, cultivating this technique alone could also help Li Hao break through to the Zhou Tian realm. Flying phase allows the use of chi to control force for brief periods of hovering flight. One must know that the ability to hover in the air is a power possessed only in the soul succession realm. However, the capability of the leaping shell body to hover in the air still cannot compare with that of the soul succession realm. It merely has some special effects in certain battle situations, but it does not significantly enhance head-on combat prowess. But the second layer of the Dragon Cicada Void Body is rather powerful. Previously, when Li Hao was in the first stage of the physical body path, he only achieved minor proficiency in the second layer. Now, the second layer's subdued dragon body has reached perfection. This brought him a terrifying force as violent as a dragon or an elephant, purely derived from increased physical strength, amounting to at least 20,000 jin, approximately 12,000 kilograms of tremendous force. Li Hao estimated that his raw physical strength alone was around 50,000 jin, approximately 30,000 kilograms at the moment. Yes, it was that exaggerated. Now at the third stage of the physical body path, Li Hao could roughly sense the state of his body without the need to go through any trials or tests. If combined with the circulation of his inner chi, merging chi force with strength, he could unleash a force of about 100,000 jin, approximately 60,000 kilograms. One cycle of chi force circulation equates to the force of one cauldron. At this moment, Li Hao circulating it 132 times amounted to 132 cauldrons, and with 2 channels that was 264 cauldrons. With each cauldron equivalent to 200 jin, that was about 50,000 jin, approximately 30,000 kilograms of force. Such a force was enough to easily shatter an ordinary martial artist at the Cycle Heaven Realm perfection with one punch. An ordinary martial artist at the Cycle Heaven Realm perfection with 10 meridians circulated 10 times represents the lowest level of the Cycle Heaven Realm, with hardly any hope of advancing to the Soul Succession Realm, and a chi force of only around 100 cauldrons, which is about 20,000 jin, approximately 12,000 kilograms. While at the first layer of the Zhou Tian realm, the circulation of 1 meridian 10 times equates to an increase of 2,000 jin in strength, though this is almost double when compared to the ordinary power passage realm's 3,600 jin of chi force. Those of divine blood can double their strength in the power passage realm to 7,200 jin of force. Even at the power passage completed stage, they are capable of contending with common martial artists at the first layer of the Zhou Tian realm. That is the strength of those with divine blood. Moreover, this doesn't include the enhancements provided by additional techniques and cultivation techniques. After all, which martial artist doesn't master at least 2 main cultivation techniques? Especially those of divine blood with their rich familial resources, their cultivation techniques are bound to be of high level, widening the gap even further. A typical martial artist with divine blood who has completed the power passage stage can easily defeat those at the second or third layer of the Zhou Tian realm with their techniques. Some exceptional prodigies can even engage in battle across 4 or 5 layers above their own. And once they reach the Zhou Tian realm, the disparities in cultivation techniques and cultivation resources lead to an even greater divide in martial power and cultivation speed. Just the 2 peerless techniques of chi circulation from the Li family, when both reaching great accomplishment, would provide 1 million jin of force at the perfection of the Zhou Tian realm, and the weakest would only have 20,000 jin, a gap of over 50 times. However, martial artists at the usual Cycle Heaven realm perfection rarely cultivate just the weakest chi circulation skill of 10 cycles, which represents the absolute lower limit. Everyone has some fortune, even without it. By struggling and fighting on their own, whether enlisting in the military, they can gain access to a medium-grade chi cultivation skill and a medium-grade meridian opening technique for breaking through 18 channels. The Yuan camp of the Li family, once led by their ancestors, means that any soldier selected for it can cultivate high-grade techniques for chi circulation and meridian opening. Taken out, they are all strong martial artists of the same realm. Thus, the Yuan camp's 10,000 soldiers are more formidable than a common army of 1,000,000. Li Hao, feeling the surging chi force inside him, showed a slight smile on his lips. The terrifying enhancement brought by the cultivation techniques far exceeds that of divine blood. After all, divine blood can only stimulate and double the basic strength of 3,600 jin in the power passage realm, but the skills brought by cultivation techniques cannot be doubled to him now. An increase of merely over 3,000 gene in strength is not worth mentioning without considering techniques like Tiger Press, Flying Phase, or the Endless Sea Sword skill. Just with physical combat, I should be able to easily defeat Jianghu martial artists at the 10th layer of the Zhou Tian realm who do not have any powerful background. However, I am still far from competing with those soldiers at the perfection of the Zhou Tian realm from the Yuan camp. Li Hao thought to himself. The soldiers of the Yuan camp were fierce tigers of Daiyu and within the demon races of northern Yin. They were synonymous with death itself. Once they marched under the banner of Yuan, even demons would tremble with fear, for in the perfection of the Zhou Tian realm, their training in high-grade qi circulation and meridian opening techniques granted them a force of 500,000 gene. How terrifying would an expedition of 10,000 such soldiers be? Moreover, the Zhou Tian realm is just the weakest level within the Yuan camp. Right now, I am only barely able to spar with soldiers of the Yuan camp around the 3rd or 4th layer of the Zhou Tian realm, but with their rich combat experience, I might not even come out as their equal, Li Hao admitted. Despite the significant improvements, Li Hao's heart remained unswelled. He continued to integrate the 3rd layer of the Dragon Cicada Void Bodis Qi circulation skill, and by eliminating the overlapping parts, his speed of qi circulation once again increased, reaching 143 cycles in one breath. That was 15 cycles more than the 100 battles cycle heaven skill, and the difference of 15 cycles in one meridian, once accumulated to the cycle heaven realm perfection, would result in a massive gap, but compared to the royal family's all heavens Zhou Tian skill, it still fell short. Li Hao then practiced various other body refinement techniques of upper, middle, and lower grades several times, achieving complete synchronization between memory and body. This led to a substantial boost in his physical strength, reaching about 15,000 gene, approximately 9,000 kilograms. After all, it was the cumulative interweaving of dozens of techniques. Furthermore, all parts of his body were greatly enhanced, with vision, hearing, and skin sensitivity all strengthened several-fold. In combat, these would all have a considerable impact on the outcome afterward. Li Hao began searching through the materials in the building regarding the Great Yin Channel. Chapter 32. The martial arts within the building were complex and categorized, but perhaps due to the Great Yin Channel being too obscure, Li Hao searched for several hours and failed to find any related records in any cultivation technique. In contrast, he acquired 2 more low-grade body refinement skills, which gave his body a slight boost once again. That evening, Li Muxiu returned, stepping through the air, with a somewhat weary look on his face, seeing Li Hao holding the Dragon River Divine Meridian cultivation method. Li Muxiu shook his head with a smile and said, "What, you're thinking of opening your channels already? Have you stepped into the Zhou Tian realm? Or are you just being overly ambitious?" "I just stepped in," Li Hao said. Li Muxiu was taken aback and couldn't help asking, "You've entered the gateway to the 100 Jiao body?" "Emichim," Li Hao nodded. "Great accomplishment could be considered as entering the gateway, right? Come, show me what you've learned." Li Muxiu didn't waste any more words. He simply asked Li Hao to demonstrate. He would know the true extent of it at a glance. Li Hao didn't hold back either. He freely began to perform the techniques. Although his exposure to these techniques hadn't been for long, his grandfather gave off a very open and straightforward feeling. If his grandfather had any thought of harming him, Li Hao wouldn't even be able to defend himself. Besides, it was just the great accomplishment of the 100 Jiao body. Surely that didn't count as anything too significant, did it? As he swung his fists, his chi force surged tumultuously in an instant. An aura akin to a Jiao dragon emerging from the sea emanated from Li Hao's body. Li Muxiu watched with a focused gaze, which soon turned into a stunned expression. Li Muxiu looked at Li Hao in astonishment. If it were merely the gateway to the 100 Jiao body, it wouldn't be anything special at most, a rather exceptional talent. The Li family wasn't short on talents. You could throw a stone and either hit a servant or a talent, but from the gateway to minor accomplishment, then to great accomplishment, that's the great accomplishment level of the 100 Jiao body. Entered the gateway in one day and reached great accomplishment in one day. Good heavens, such a cultivation talent for body refinement was certainly not inferior to Little Nine's talents for cultivation, was it? Li Muxiu couldn't help but size up Li Hao. Was this child's talent for body refinement really that exceptional? However, it was a pity that it was only body refinement talent. With this thought, Li Muxiu couldn't help but heave a deep sigh in his heart. Although he didn't like pursuing fame and fortune, being able to cultivate was absolutely a good thing for anyone. After Li Hao finished demonstrating, He saw his grandfather lost in thought, and with innocent eyes, he took the opportunity to ask, "Grandfather, on another primordial cultivation skill, I saw the words mystic vein. What is this mystic vein? You looked at that secret text as well? You didn't start cultivating it, did you?" Li Muxiu regained his senses, his brows furrowed suddenly, and his expression became serious. He stared at Li Hao's innocent little face and realized he might be overthinking it. This kid was too young. If he had been distracted by other cultivations, how could he have managed to bring the 100 Jiao body to great accomplishment today? Before Li Hao could answer, Li Muxiu continued earnestly, "You have a great talent for body refinement, and that's a good thing, but do not squander it. How many talents out there, because they're young and arrogant, relying on their intelligence, study this and that, and end up knowing a little about everything, deemed jack of all trades, but guess what? They get smacked to death by a slap from those among their peers who are left behind. Others only need to practice one move. If that move is strong enough, deadly enough, they can be unrivaled." Li Muxiu said, "You see people being named Sword Saint, Blade Saint, and even titles like Arrow King, they're all famous figures. Do they not understand the value of well-rounded development? But they all specialize in their fields, continuously advancing. A person's life is limited, and it's hard enough to reach the end of one path, let alone two. Pursuing both is simply ruining one's own future." Having said this, he addressed Li Hao, "Families like ours, we have an advantage in that we have a strong foundation, a relatively comfortable growth process, whereas those Jianghu heroes without background have to face all kinds of complexities from a young age, the hardships of life and so forth, forced to learn whatever they can to survive. But we are different, we have the luxury to choose. They delve into poisons, medical skills, boxing, and swordplay, but so what? They may have an advantage when facing someone of the same realm, but how much time do you have to spend learning these? If it's 10 years, others spending the same 10 years on one thing will have a higher realm than you. When the time comes, just being 1 or 2 levels higher in realm is enough to easily overpower you. Therefore, only when you reach your limit, with no hope left in your life, should you consider broadening your scope. Otherwise, it's unnecessary before that point." He spoke with heartfelt earnestness, and Li Hao understood his grandfather's perspective. Being a jack of all trades was powerful indeed. But time did not permit it, however. This was for the average martial artist. As for himself, Li Hao had the advantage of a system panel, but without a sufficient number of artistic skill points. Li Hao too could only specialize in the sword path and physical body path. Indeed, even now, he prioritized the physical body path and personal cultivation above all else. After solemnly advising Li Hao, Li Muxiu sighed and resumed his casual demeanor, saying, "The mystic vein you mentioned comes from the primordial body refining skill. That's also why this incomplete skill is allowed on the 6th floor. But to learn to open the mystic vein, you need to progressively cultivate to the 3rd layer, which takes far too much time. This skill is even harder. Those with high comprehension might take 5 to 8 years, and those with lower comprehension, 20 or 30 years, might find it challenging. Therefore, although the mystic vein is precious, it must be forsaken." No? Li Hao wore an expression of curiosity, wrapped his legs, and sat cross-legged. The mystic vein, also known as the Great Yin Channel, is rumored to be one of 108 veins in the human body besides the normal meridian channels. Li Muxiu said, "My Li family's strongest, the Dragon River Divine Meridian, allows for the opening of 54 channels, while the royal family's Dong Huang scripture permits 62. That's already the strongest meridian opening skill, but reaching 108 is still too far off. So whether or not there really are that many has always been mere speculation. However, outside of these 108, there are 2 major veins, which are the Great Yin Channel and the Great Yang Meridian. When these 2 major channels are opened, the cultivation techniques practiced will carry some special powers, making attacks fiercer and more domineering. At the same time, these 2 channels can hold more chi force and circulate it through the Zhou Tian realm." He glanced at Li Hao and said, "If you can circulate 100 cycles in one vein, then in the Great Yin Channel you could achieve 1,000 cycles, a 10-fold difference. You could stack and accumulate 100 cycles of chi force within the Great Yin Channel. And 1,000 cycles in one vein are not just a quantitative accumulation. It's a qualitative transformation of explosive power. The specifics will become evident in battle, hence, those who can open these 2 special channels are geniuses among geniuses, the best of the best, once in 100 years. Li Hao suddenly understood besides the Great Yin Channel, there was also the Great Yang Meridian. The existence of these 2 special channels was equivalent to an extra 20 meridians. Considering that the strongest technique of the royal family encompasses only 64 meridians, opening both special channels could mean an increase by 1/3. By then, even if one were to practice the Li family's Dragon River Divine Meridian, it could unleash a force surpassing that of the royal family. It's extremely difficult to open these two special channels. It requires fate, talent, and comprehension, and outside forces can hardly assist, Li Muxiu observed Li Hao and said, in the second generation of our Li family. Only 3 people have opened one special channel, and it's only your 9th uncle who possesses both channels, showing unparalleled talent. With that, he couldn't help but sigh. Li Hao was somewhat stunned from what he had said. He thought such occurrences were extremely rare. Yet within the second generation of the Li family, there were already 3 individuals with such a meridian? And the 9th uncle, both? Little Nine was born with the innate Great Yang Meridian, while he opened the Great Yin channel himself later in life. Even your old man only had one special channel, similar to your father. Li Muxiu shook his head as he spoke. Li Hao was speechless. This 9th uncle was truly extraordinary. All right, just focus on your cultivation, Li Muxiu said to Li Hao. Your talent is exceptional, but you were born with blocked meridians, making it more difficult for you than other body refinement practitioners. If you are unlucky, the Zhou Tian realm might be your limit, so don't be distracted. Refine the 1000 Jiao's holy body well. If you can reach the 4th layer, you may have a chance to break through to the soul succession realm. By then, you would be considered a martial artist who can stand on your own, at least not someone who can be easily killed. Li Hao nodded. Seeing Li Hao so obedient, Li Muxiu felt gratified and said, in your free time, take a look at the Dragon River Divine Meridian. If there's anything you don't understand, just ask me. Your father and the others all had to learn by themselves. Although there were instructors, your grandfather had quite a temper and never taught directly. It was always officers from the military who taught, and often before the instructor finished explaining, your father and his siblings had already mastered it. Little Nine could even extend the knowledge further. Hey, it seemed that recalling that time brought a touch of a smile to the old man's face. Li Hao felt somewhat helpless. There were too many prodigies in the Li family, making his own extraordinary abilities seem rather ordinary. Of course, he hadn't leveraged all his efforts on collecting skill points yet. Otherwise, he could have made further progress, but life isn't just about cultivating, it also includes living, or else what would be the purpose of reliving this life? In the following days, besides following the old master for morning fishing sessions, Li Hao spent his afternoons immersed in books about qi cultivation techniques and secrets of meridian opening. Half a month went by, and he had successfully added 3 top-notch scriptures to his panel. Li Hao believed his comprehension was quite good. After all, he needed to grasp the basics to add them to his panel, and he managed one every 5 days. Not too shabby for maintaining the Li family's reputation. He heard that direct descendants of the Li family took about half a month to grasp the basics of the supreme scriptures. However, with the mindset of a person who had lived 2 lifetimes, Li Hao wasn't proud. He merely considered it a normal performance. It was just that these 3 scriptures were not part of the body refinement realm, so his understanding of the 3rd phase of the physical body path remained unaffected even after adding the scriptures. Instead, a new attribute of a great path appeared in his panel. Control path. Not yet started. Li Hao guessed that these 3 scriptures were part of the normal cultivation methods for martial artists, and that control path probably corresponded to the normal cultivation path. Its name was just slightly odd, but Li Hao didn't think too much of it. As long as he could add points, it was fine, and so he once again realized the scarcity of skill points. Besides fishing and playing chess, it's time to consider painting and even cooking. These were the types of arts recorded in the game, and without a doubt, they all could increase skill points. Chapter 33. As soon as he thought of it, he acted on it. Li Hao asked Zhao to prepare the paints, as well as brushes, ink, paper, and inkstone for him, and after fishing with the old master each day, he would ask to return to his mountain and river courtyard to rest. Li Muxiu didn't say much about this. His principle in nurturing Li Hao was to let him grow freely. Although Li Hao showed exceptional talent in body refinement, Li Muxiu didn't force him to train arduously every day. If Li Hao wanted to seek his guidance, he would earnestly provide it. If not, he would take the child to wander the mountains and waters, fishing in the wild every day, in the mountain and river courtyard. Within the spacious courtyard, Li Hao had someone bring over 2 stools, one tall, one short, and started to draw on the easel like an art student. Zhao earnestly advised him, but Li Hao turned a deaf ear. Zhao was completely helpless in the face of this young master, who was fond of indulging in pleasures and neglecting his duties, leaving no choice but to hand him over to Li Fu. Li Hao had long since figured out how to deal with Li Fu, impressing him by demonstrating the 2nd level of the Jiao dragon body. Li Fu watched, dumbstruck, suspecting he was seeing things, and asked Li Hao to perform it again. Upon seeing it clearly the second time, the man was so moved that his eyes welled up with tears. He simply attributed it to his second uncle's cultivation and teaching that allowed Li Hao to master the second level of this peerless body refinement technique in less than a month. While grateful to the second uncle, he was also surprised and excited about Li Hao's talent in body refinement. Such talent was even more impressive than mastering the great accomplishment of the bull strength in 3 months. Truly a first-rate body refinement genius. Seeing his wildly excited demeanor, Li Hao was secretly glad he didn't directly demonstrate the third-level 100 Jiao body in front of him. After all, not everyone possessed the old master's vision and capacity to handle such things. As a trade-off, Li Hao promised Li Fu that he would seriously cultivate with his second uncle, but only under the condition that when he was doing something else, Li Fu wouldn't intervene. While this delighted Li Fu, it also caused him some consternation. Li Hao's talent in body refinement was so high, he now wished Li Hao would spend all day cultivating outside of eating and sleeping, so he could catch up to the prodigies with 9th-grade battle bodies. Yet, Li Hao's temperament was particularly laid back, which left Li Fu feeling quite helpless. After much back and forth, Li Fu finally relented to Li Hao's persistence, so Li Hao began to paint openly in the courtyard with each stroke of the brush. Words soon appeared before his eyes. Art of painting. Level 0 1100. It really worked. Li Hao smiled knowingly and then began to paint with great flourish. Having experience with chess Tao and fishing Tao, Li Hao guessed that the better he painted, the more painting experience he would gain. So, he didn't treat it too casually, but instead began to paint quite earnestly. However, in his previous life, he was a businessman who had spent decades immersed in commerce. What did he know about painting? He did have a bit of understanding of girls who could paint. For his first attempt at painting, Li Hao chose to do a portrait sketch and picked out the most beautiful maid in the courtyard to stand before the easel. Then, with confidence, he picked up the brush. For a person, draw a circle first, then a line, a slant, and a flick, followed by another slant and flick. It needs some hair. Done. Painting experience 1. His painting is indeed difficult. Li Hao smiled wryly to himself. Next to him, Zhao sneaked a glance at the easel and asked hesitantly, "Young master, what is this you've drawn? Can't you see? It's a person." Li Hao replied indignantly, "That doesn't look like." Zhao was a bit puzzled. Huffing, Li Hao said, "You're saying it doesn't look like it on the outside, right? That's because you don't understand the deeper meaning of my art. Look at this circle. You think it's a head, but it's not. It represents being slick. Look at this line. You think it's a body, but it's not. It signifies that to stand tall, one must be slick." Zhao, you still have a lot to learn. Don't be so straightforward and impulsive. But isn't that a bunch of scribbles on the circle supposed to be hair? Not exactly, and yet it is. It's both hair and dreams. Dreams? Li Hao said nonchalantly. Dreams belong at the top of your head? Seems logical, right? This lush hair represents many people's dreams, also logical, right? Zhao was bewildered. Having finished his rambling, Li Hao continued to paint. Zhao and Li Fu exchanged looks, both baffled as Li Hao kept painting dozens of almost identical drawings while the beautiful maid remained standing in front of the easel. Seemingly just for background decoration, what was the point? Clearly, this young master had no talent in the art of painting, unlike his skill in chess, but since it was all just frivolous pursuits that squandered his martial arts potential, they were too indolent to probe any further. Li Hao painted quickly, and soon there was a pile of discarded paper on the ground. Before long, his experience had accumulated to 100. All of it was accumulated bit by bit. Li Hao felt quite exhausted. Art of painting has been raised to level 1 skill points 1s. The text prompt emerged. A surge of insights into the art of painting flooded his mind. Li Hao closed his eyes for a moment and soon digested the information completely. In an instant, he realized how much of a novice he had been previously. When he resumed his brushwork, his strokes carried a divine charm. Quickly, the graceful figure of a woman emerged on the paper, full of life and poise. Li Fu and Zhao, who were idly looking around, caught a glimpse unintentionally and were momentarily stunned, their eyes widening in astonishment. It wasn't long before Li Hao added finishing touches with deft strokes of his brush to the lips, dipped in rouge to apply the colors, and in no time, the image on the canvas stood out vividly and elegantly. Painting experience 13. Li Hao couldn't help but feel elated. Indeed, the more meticulously and beautifully he painted, the more his painting experience increased, and he had finally become someone who could paint. Young master, this is. Zhao stared at the canvas, dumbfounded. Just earlier, he was drawing crude stick figures, and now he had reached this level of skill? Could the young master be a genius who learned to paint in merely a short moment? Or was he pretending before? Or perhaps those stick figures, as the young master claimed, really depicted inner meaning? His preconceived notions were strongly challenged. Basics, don't overthink, Li Hao said indifferently. Zhao didn't understand, but that didn't stop him from being profoundly shaken after painting a few more pictures and feeling increasingly adept. Li Hao had Li Fu and Zhao stand before the canvas. He painted a portrait for each of them, capturing a dynamic gaze, one showing a time-worn kindness while the other a sternness that betrayed a hint of awkwardness, looking away, both strikingly realistic. Seeing the completed paintings in their hands, both men showed diverse expressions, their emotions complex. The young master's talent was rarely seen in the world. Had he been born into a family of literati, he would have been treasured. What a pity that this was the divine general mansion where one was born to defend the legacy of Dayu. Once the paint on the canvas dried, both men unconsciously rolled their paintings carefully and cherished them, a sign of their earnestness. They would remember. In the year they turned 7, the young master painted a portrait for them. This was the first time in their lives they had received a painting of themselves. Time flies, and half a year later, on the calm shores of Blackwater Demon Lake, 3 figures were fishing at a distance of over 10 meters apart. 2 elders and 1 child. Needless to say, the child was Li Hao. Among the elders, besides Li Muxiu, there was another person, a fishing companion of Li Muxiu. Li Hao had heard the old man introduce him as Feng Bopping, a thief saint with an interesting name. According to the thief saint, he had chosen the name himself. It did not mean he only acted when things were calm, but that after he made his move, everything would remain undisturbed. In their leisure time while fishing, Li Muxiu even lightheartedly shared stories of the thief saint's exploits with Li Hao, revealing he truly lived up to his name. Many of the forces that had been stolen from by the thief saint only discovered their treasures missing months or even years later. Oftentimes they were initially clueless about the theft, rendering them unable to track down who had stolen the treasures or when the theft had occurred, or even to discern whether it was an inside job. Reputation well concealed, treasures seek their owners. This was the thief Saint Feng Bopping. On the shore, Li Hao expertly set up a large pot, simultaneously cleaning the fish demon he had just fished up, gutting and cutting it up while occasionally glancing at his swim bladder. The fishing rod at the other end was fastened to the shore with a rope threaded through a hole and tied to a large stone. Should there be any activity, he'd be able to react promptly. At this moment, Li Hao deftly handled the fish demon's innards with his sword, his movements skilled. Both Li Muxiu and the thief saint had grown accustomed to this sight. Although it was only fish being prepared, they had long recognized Li Hao's remarkable talent in the art of the sword. When Li Muxiu first saw Li Hao wield a sword, he even ridiculed him, thinking that Jian Wudao lacked insight for missing out on a real treasure. The thief saint, Feng Bopping, also held a fondness for this lively lad who enjoyed fishing Tao and showed no qualms about his sensitive identity. He had earnestly promised that he would search far and wide for a precious medicine capable of opening Li Hao's meridians. Soon, snow-white fish meat hit the pot. Li Hao also needed some fresh coriander and chili peppers into the mix, and the fragrant spicy aroma immediately spread, drawing the elders' gazes again and again. Their lines were cast far out into deep waters, using their bodies as the pole. With the line invisible and no float visible, they could sense any ripple through the line alone. Both of you, the food will be ready in 3 minutes, Li Hao said with a smile, having spent a lot of time together. Li Hao's address for Li Muxiu had become second elder and Feng Bopping is old Feng, while the 2 elders had come up with a nickname they thought fitting and vivid for Li Hao, Little Hao. Chapter 34. The young lad's cooking skills are getting better and better, said the old man with a hearty laugh. I've been fishing my whole life and have long since grown tired of fish, but the fish dishes that the kid makes are something I could still eat. Feng Bopping laughed heartily, flicked his sleeves, and took the lead to sit on the large rock next to the pot. With a wave of his hand, a cup and jade chopsticks appeared in his palm like picking flowers. Although he and Li Muxiu shared similar tastes, there were certain differences between them. Feng Bopping was somewhat finicky about cleanliness and had a fondness for beautiful jade, using luxurious bowls and chopsticks even for eating, which did not pale in comparison to the royal clan within the court. He handed Li Hao a clean pair of bowl and chopsticks with a smile, yet did not bother Li Muxiu, instead quietly awaiting the boiling pot. Li Hao estimated the time was about right, then flipped the lid over, setting it aside on some leaves. The rich aroma burst forth immediately, ignoring the usual courtesies of elders first and children last. He reached straight in with his chopsticks to grab some meat. You guys wait for me, exclaimed Li Muxiu as he hurried over, hastily fashioned a pair of chopsticks from a twig, and began stirring in the pot. Although Feng Bopping was particular about cleanliness, He didn't say anything about Li Muxia's actions. Li Hao felt this was probably the feeling of lifelong camaraderie. The three of them ate with great relish. Despite the significant age difference, neither of the two older men pulled rank on. Li Hao, sometimes you would call me kid and I would call you old man, showing carefree personalities. I didn't expect you to bring out new tricks in cooking fish. Li Muxia, after drinking a mouthful of spicy soup, clicked his tongue in appreciation. Li Hao smiled. Indeed, in the past 6 months, his self-taught drawing and cooking had both steadily improved, reaching the second level. So had his fishing Tao. Maybe there really was something to the newbie protection phase theory. In the first month, his fishing success rate was extremely high, but now it seemed rare to catch anything. Sometimes he would even stay up until midnight, forced to find a shallow spot and catch a Power Passage Realm demon fish to avoid returning empty-handed. As they talked, suddenly Li Hao's gaze darted toward the fish bladder, which was gently touching the water surface. There was movement. He swiftly put down his bowl and chopsticks and crouched, rushing over to the fishing rod. Right at that moment, the fish bladder suddenly plunged underwater. Li Hao quickly set the hook and pulled on the line, which immediately tightened on the other end, transmitting a tremendous force. A massive commotion came from beneath the water as well. This kid, the two elders, seeing this, both revealed a hint of envy. They couldn't believe this youngster had gotten a bite first. Soon, the commotion under the water grew stronger and a demon beast emerged from the surface. It was not a fish demon, but a shrimp demon with a hardened shell. It was 4 or 5 meters long, covered in spikes, with fearsome pincers capable of crushing rocks. At that moment, the shrimp demon was grabbing the fishing line with its pincers, its bulging eyes glaring at Li Hao on the shore. Seeing that it was just a little kid, it screeched in fury, yet it was also filled with dread. Where did this wild child come from, possessing such strength? Its struggles became more violent, but the fishing line was given to Li Hao by Li Muxia, impervious to water and fire and able to withstand 1,000,000 caddies of force, something a common Zhou Tian realm shrimp demon could not break. Soon, under the dragging, the shrimp demon's body slowly neared the shore. Its eyeballs showed a struggle, contemplating whether to mutilate itself to escape the hook and flee for its life. Just then, Li Hao on the shore staggered as if he couldn't steady the fishing rod. The shrimp demon hesitated upon seeing this. After a tug-of-war, the shrimp demon felt that this child was only slightly more powerful than itself, and had it not been for the injury caused by the fishhook, it might not have been defeated. Its eyeballs rotating, the shrimp demon tried to pull Li Hao into the water, but each time, Li Hao managed to steady himself in the nick of time, narrowly securing his position. Eventually, after a fierce struggle, the shrimp demon, pained by the pulling, couldn't help but let out its vicious nature. It shrieked and surged towards the fishing platform, intent on crushing this ignorant, annoying brat. But as it came ashore, the previously wobbling child suddenly steadied himself, his face revealing a relieved and beaming smile. This isn't good. The moment the shrimp demon realized something was amiss, a massive force suddenly transmitted from the fishhook, pulling its unbalanced body in midair directly towards him. With a whoosh, something like a silver light streaked by. What was that, so bright? The next moment, the shrimp demon knew nothing more as the world went dark. A massive shrimp head rolled away as Li Hao casually stuck his sword into the ground beside him. He then dragged the body over near the cooking area, not far from the two elders, saying, "It's a pity it didn't bite earlier, otherwise I could have added some shrimp paste to your meal at noon." Seeing how effortlessly Li Hao dealt with the Zhou Tian realm shrimp demon, both elders smiled. They had hidden their breaths earlier, which is why the shrimp demon hadn't detected them. Emboldening it, Li Hao cast the bait again and continued to eat and drink. "This Zhou Tian realm level 9 demon was so easily slain by you. You must have also reached a small level of achievement with the Li family's Dragon River Divine Meridian," Feng Bopping said with a laugh. Li Hao did not deny it. A small level of achievement? He had already reached perfection. The regular fishing session came to an end as the sun dipped low in the western sky. Li Hao said goodbye to the two gentlemen and the thief saint, who mentioned he had to take a long trip and would be away for half a month. Clearly, some treasure was about to be stolen somewhere. Li Muxia had long been accustomed to departures, and with a smile, he said goodbye and led Li Hao back to the Divine General Mansion. Now that Li Hao had taken an interest in fishing, Li Muxia did not continue to introduce him to the traditional rules of fishing and went straight back to the Listening Rain Tower. Outside the tower, Li Fu, as usual, was waiting there, but this time, beside him stood a young maid, precisely Xuejian from the Eternal Spring Court. Seeing the elder and younger returning, Xuejian couldn't help but size up Li Hao. She had long heard that this second master was eccentric. Many ladies and mistresses from the various courts wished to send their children to him for guidance, but he paid attention to no one. Unexpectedly, he would be so close to Li Hao, a child with no talent for martial arts. As such thoughts went through her mind, Zhuajian's gentle face betrayed no hint of them. She smiled, showing her teeth, and stepped forward to explain her purpose. It turned out that Lady He Jianlan was thinking of Li Hao, who had already been studying body refinement realm techniques for quite some time and wanted him to enter the martial training grounds to practice with other youths from the family. Of course, Li Fu had long learned of this news from Zhuajian's mouth, and as she spoke, eagerness spread across his face, almost as if he wished to nod in agreement on Li Hao's behalf. But after hearing this, Li Hao and Li Muxiu looked at each other and both laughed. Li Muxiu knew Li Hao's words carried little weight and refusal might lead to persistent entanglements, so he waved his hand and said, "The little guy is fine following me, I can teach him well enough. Going to the martial training grounds would be a waste of time." The old master grumbled internally. Sending the boy to the martial training grounds, wasn't that just bullying? The disciples in the martial training grounds were at best in the Zhou Tian realm, and those with higher talents would study under famous mountains or join the military, letting Li Hao, a boy who could easily kill ninth-layer demons of the Zhou Tian realm, go to the martial training grounds would be like beating up children and kicking women. What's the difference? Hearing the old master's refusal, both Li Fu and Xuejian became anxious, but Xuejian, as if having anticipated this response, immediately spoke sincerely and gently, explaining that it would only take a short practice in the mornings at the martial training grounds to hone real combat experience and practice skills with peers. Li Fu nodded repeatedly at her side, agreeing fervently. While following his uncle would afford the best guidance, he was also concerned that the old master might be leading Li Hao astray. After all, though the uncle was powerful, he appeared to be rather unfocused. He had never heard Li Hao discuss matters of cultivation with his uncle. Instead, they would become excitedly engrossed in conversations about which fish to catch, how to set the hook, and so on. Furthermore, even disciples of a sword saint like Li's uncle had to spar with peers of the same realm. Otherwise, the teachings that remained mere theory would ultimately be understood more slowly. When Li Muxiu heard what Xuejian was suggesting, he nearly rolled his eyes. Would sparring with those kids from the family be more challenging than outwitting demon fish while fishing? It should be noted, fishing for Zhou Tian realm demons was not just brute labor. These demon fish had gained intelligence and knew danger. They would rather tear their bodies than escape the hook, and dealing with soul succession realm demons was even harder to manage. Put simply, fishing is a comprehensive skill involving intelligence, stealth, deception, showing weakness, and engaging in a battle of strength. All of it. For these reasons, the old master had been addicted to it for half his life, and was still as enthralled as ever. With an outright refusal and feigned anger, threatening to beat someone up if it was mentioned again, Xuejian and Li Fu could only accept it reluctantly. Once Li Hao had put away the fishing gear in the listening rain tower, he went back to the courtyard with Li Fu, learning along the way that Northern Yen had sent a letter. Their eyes lit up at the news, and they hurried to the Eternal Spring Court. A family letter was in Lady He Jianlan's hands. She sat upright in the hall, her demeanor noble and dignified. "Tiangang is running short of military funds. I need to attend court tomorrow." A pensive look crossed He Jianlan's eyes. Just then, Li Hao and Li Fu rushed in hurriedly. Li Fu still had the sense to remember propriety, but Li Hao had already barged in. Li Fu tried to stop him but failed and ended up following him in a fluster. When they faced He Jianlan's gaze, the man's face showed a hint of embarrassment, and he quickly bowed to apologize. "Is it from them?" Li Hao hurriedly asked. He Jianlan's gaze shifted to Li Hao, and upon sensing the faint smell of the water on him, she knew he had just returned from fishing with his uncle. Seeing Li Hao's expectant look, He Jianlan did not mind the boy's rashness and nodded slightly. What does it say?" Li Hao asked, his eyes full of anticipation. He Jianlan paused slightly, a fleeting look of tenderness in her eyes, but it quickly vanished as she spoke softly. "It's a military report from Northern Yen. Your father says they've just slain a group of demons, and there are issues with grain and provisions." She did not give details as it involved military affairs. "Did they encounter any dangers? Did they mention me?" asked Li Hao. He Jianlan's fingers tightened slightly around the letter as she nodded and said with a smile, "Your parents asked me to feed you well and not to overexert yourself. They also inquired about what you've recently eaten, whether you've caught a cold, or whether you have been obedient to your elders." After listening quietly to the latter's words, Li Hao said, "Could I see the letter, please?" "I can read." He Jianlan closed the letter and shook her head slightly. "No, it contains military matters and you're still too young." "All right then," replied Li Hao, and then he said, "Please write back on my behalf. Let them know I've been eating well. My cooking is pretty great." I can make tasty food by myself. Also, tell them I'm diligently cultivating my body, which is strong, so I won't catch a cold. I go fishing with the second uncle every day without hardship. The uncle treats me very well, and he even praised my cooking. When they return, I'll let them have a taste, and also tell them to take good care of themselves and not worry about me. I'm safe here in the divine general mansion with both the uncle and you backing me up. Nobody bullies me. Chapter 35. Hearing her child's careful instructions word by word, Jianlin's expression tightened slightly. She nodded gently and said warmly, "Great lady will convey all that you have said. You need not worry. Practice well with your second grandfather, obey his words, and avoid acting rashly. When you have free time, you may also go to the martial training ground to practice, where you are always welcome." She had not asked Li Hao to go to the martial training ground before for fear he would be bullied. But now that Li Hao had embarked on his cultivation path, visiting the training ground for sparring and real combat practice would be beneficial for his progress. After Li Hao left with Li Fu, Jianlan couldn't help but let out a gentle sigh. By her side, Xuejian, seeing her demeanor, asked cautiously, "Why do you sigh, madam?" Shaoqi is busy with military affairs in northern Yen, perhaps too busy to remember this couple, too, after so many years without seeing each other. I wonder why they don't send more letters to inquire about the child. Hao is actually very understanding, Jianlan murmured softly, her tone laced with a hint of helplessness and reproach. Xuejian, quick-witted, was taken aback and said, "Could it be that what madam just said was all?" Jianlan glanced at her, and Xuejian immediately stopped speaking, bowing her head but unable to resist, quietly looking towards the courtyard entrance where the small figure had already walked far away. So all the words of concern and greetings madam had just expressed were made up by her. Yet the young master had taken them seriously. Back at Mountain and River Courtyard, Li Hao had not yet taken out his drawing board when he received another letter delivered by a house servant. Seeing the signature, a smile emerged on his face, and the feeling of loss in his heart dissipated. Although he did not have much contact with that couple from northern Yen, strangely enough, in the quiet of some late nights, he somewhat missed them. Maybe it was the warmth of that embrace, which somehow came back to him in a dream, or perhaps it was those genuine eyes, which he had not forgotten to this day. The letter in his hand was from Sword Saint's retreat, naturally sent by that lovely young girl. Ever since she went to the retreat, she would send letters every so often. Initially, it was one every 3 to 5 days. Later, as the letter said, her Sword Saint master became stricter, wanting her to focus more on cultivation, so the frequency of writing letters gradually decreased. But now he still received one every month. The letter no longer contained daily matters since she had written about them so many times already. The cultivation at Sword Saint's retreat was quite monotonous and repetitive. Such was the nature of foundational training. Li Hao opened the letter, sat on the sunlit lounge chair, and with a smile, leisurely read every word, leaving none unread. Inside, he saw a misspelled word, accompanied by a circle and a cross, indicating that she wrote the wrong character but didn't know the correct one and simply skipped it. In his mind, Li Hao could almost picture the young girl scratching her head in frustration as she sat writing the letter, and he couldn't help but chuckle softly. The letter described her recent meals and the precious medicine her Sword Saint master had obtained for her. Her cultivation had reached the 5th level of the Shou Tian realm, and she had opened 21 mystic veins, practicing the most powerful qi circulation skill in the retreat. Li Hao had heard second grandfather mention that the retreat's qi circulation skill was the Galaxy Sword qi skill, a top-tier technique. If one achieved cycle heaven realm perfection, they could open up to 49 veins. In comparison to the Li family's 54 veins Dragon River Divine Meridian cultivation technique, it was only ever so slightly inferior. Besides, the young girl had already opened the Tine Mystic vein and was highly favored by her Sword Saint master. Seeing this, Li Hao couldn't help feeling happy for her. The Dragon River Divine Meridian cultivation technique was not shared outside the direct lineage and was off-limits to even Bian Ruxue, his fiancée, as well as all the wives of the various courtyards, including the great lady Jianlan. However, the techniques they were allowed to practice were also top-notch, only slightly less superior. If someone possessed extremely high talent and could open up 2 special major veins by themselves, they could compensate for the gap in foundational techniques. However, such talented individuals were few and far between in the world. After reading the letter, Li Hao called for a house servant to prepare pen, ink, paper, and a letter for him. He wrote with ease and care, slowly finishing a piece, sharing his recent endeavors in painting, cooking, and the joys of fishing. as well as befriending an interesting elderly predecessor. Of course, the letter did not mention the title or the name of the thief saint. After all, Feng and Dayu belongs to the antagonists, unpopular among the various forces. It was only someone with the casual and unconstrained nature of the second master who would become close friends with such a person. However, outsiders were unaware of their relationship, otherwise they would have loudly cursed behind their backs. Colluding with corrupt officials, no less. Having finished, Li Hao, as usual, casually drew a small emoji to encourage her to work hard at her cultivation and to strive together. After entrusting the letter to a house servant for mailing, Li Hao moved his drawing board over and began to draw as usual. Now at the second level in the art of painting, his technique had improved even more than before. The changes in his seemingly simple sketches were not significant, but upon closer inspection, it was evident that the eyes in his paintings had become more lifelike, as if gazing out from the paper itself. While he was in the midst of an unfinished painting, a group of figures came galloping into the courtyard, their noise preceding them, and from a distance, someone yelled, "How we're here." Looking up, he saw 3 rowdy kids tumbling their way over. They were the only child of the 6th lady, Li Yuanzhao, the second son and 3rd daughter of the 5th lady, Li Yun and Li Jining. On the day they said farewell to Bian Ruxue as she departed for the Sword Cottage, these legitimate classmates came to the mountain and river courtyard to see her off and thus had met Li Hao afterward. That kid Li Yun came over multiple times, inquiring about Bian Ruxue's whereabouts and when she would return. It was then that Li Hao realized this young rascal, not even fully grown, dared to set his sights on his little girl. However, he didn't stoop to arguing with the kid, he simply spanked him soundly, swelling the boy's buttocks. Then, after a bit of intimidation and threats, he made sure the young brat didn't dare complain to the 5th lady, because after all, it's no fun when adults get involved in children's squabbles. Of course, the main reason was that he could win. Since then, Li Yun would carry a hint of a shadow and fear around Li Hao, but that didn't stop him from coming back to the mountain and river courtyard. He later brought his sister and the other youngster from the 6th lattice to bolster their courage and came over together. After several interactions, Li Hao easily became the king among these 3 children. "How, last time you were telling us about the monkey that got suppressed, but you haven't finished. What happened next?" Li Yuanzhao, plump and short, ran up to the drawing board, his dirty little hands hesitating to touch the paper, lest he get a knock on the head from Li Hao. Yeah. Li Yun nodded repeatedly, his head bobbing like a pecking chicken, already tamed by Li Hao. Next to him, the little girl Li Jining handed Li Hao a food box, her bright eyes sparkling as she said, "Brother Hao, this is the crispy cake my mother made. We've all tried it, and it's really delicious. We brought some for you." "I haven't tried it yet," Li Yuanzhao blurted out, instantly exposing a flaw, and reached out his dirty little hand, fresh from martial practice at the training field, to grab some, but Li Jining twisted her body to dodge and gave him a fierce glare. The little fatty instantly looked at her with a mix of hurt and appeal. Li Hao laughed and, without any hesitation, took the food box and opened it. A pleasant aroma wafted out. He tried a piece and found it indeed delightful. Then he shared the rest with the others, saying, "You go grab a little stool for yourselves and come over. Eat while I finish the story." "Zhao, chairs?" Li Yun immediately bellowed. Li Hao knocked on his head in annoyance. "Zhao is not someone you can order around. Get it yourself." Covering his head, Li Yun appeared somewhat timid and muttered something unintelligible. He then pointed at a house servant and ordered, "You, bring me a stool over here." The servant did not dare disobey and went to fetch it with a smile. Li Yuanzhao and Li Jining, familiar with the routine, ran into the house to find small stools for themselves and sat down obediently beside Li Hao. Chapter 36. That cheeky monkey. Li Hao broke apart the crispy pancake, savoring it slowly while continuing the story for the 3 eagerly anticipating youngsters. In the pavilion, Zhao and Li Fu watched from a distance, both wearing helpless smiles. The young master had somehow come across these storybooks. If only he would devote all that effort to body refinement, surely he would achieve great things in the future. However, having watched Li Hao be carefree for so long, they had come to accept many things and let nature take its course. Just like Second Master had said, the Vastly family didn't lack a specialist in body refinement. But that child might lack a happy childhood without his parents around. Perhaps this was the only joy he had. As the sun set into dusk and the story ended, Li Hao shooed away the 3 youngsters, particularly reminding the most mischievous among them, Li Yun. "Go back and behave. Don't get beaten by your mother again." This little guy had become so excited when he heard the part about causing havoc in the heavenly palace, showing his rebellious streak by arguing with his own mother and wanting to switch from swordsmanship to using a staff afterwards. under his mother's direct guidance. He still felt that the sword suited him better. Li Yun's face turned red, and he ran off quickly. Brother Hao, I'll come to see you again tomorrow. His sister, Li Jining, said with a gentle, timid smile. Brother Hao. Li Yuanzhao, the little chubby boy, also hesitated to speak. Go on. Go. Li Hao waved them all away with his hand. After the children had all left the backyard, Li Hao calmed his mind and continued to paint. After gaining dozens of skill points in the art of painting, the moon had already risen. Li Hao had dinner with Li Fu and Zhao. After returning to his room, he picked up a book on martial arts taken from the Listening Rain Tower and flipped through it. This book was not about cultivation techniques but rather served as an introduction to various realms. Soul succession realm, as the name implies, involves inheriting a prior soul. For those without background, ordinary people can enter the soul succession by joining a martial temple. If favored by heroic spirits, they too can undergo soul succession. Furthermore, by enlisting in the army, one can worship the souls of soldiers who died in past Dayu wars and possibly receive a legacy from a heroic spirit. Moreover, joining famous mountains, great teachers, or sects also allows access to ancestral heroic spirits. Li Hao quietly read, his eyes flashing with light. He pulled up his panel to check name. Li Hao. Age 8. Cultivation level 10th layer of circulation realm. Sword Dao 3 stages. Flying phase. Hidden bow. Sword skill Endless Sea Tide. Perfected Falling Snow. Sword skill True form. Physical body path 5 stages. Myriad forms. Tiger press. Body techniques Stone Skin. 100 refinements. True form. 1000 jiaos. Holy body. 4th layer. 1000 jiaos. Body beginner. Primordial. 3rd layer. Enter the ghost body. Perfection. Dragon Cicada. Void body. 4th layer. Dragon soul body. Beginner. Control path 3 stages. Control techniques Heavenly Gang Zhou Tian skill perfection 100 battles cycle Heaven skill perfection Dragon River Divine Meridian perfection 9 revolutions Starry Sky skill perfection Chess Tao 4 stages 281 0000 Fishing Tao 2 stages 971000 Art of Painting 2 stages 231 1000 Culinary Tao 2 stages 736 1000 Chess Catalog collected Myriad forms Tiger press Flying phase Hidden bow Fishing catalog collected None famous paintings collected 1000 Mountains Birds Flying painting Snow Mountain Spirit Fox painting Kylan Steed painting Cooking recipes collected None State of Mind Chess Heart Embedded artistic skill points 0 The panel now was visibly longer than before. Even though Li Hao had omitted dozens of body refining techniques, it was still a dense list. From fishing, he had received 6 points of artistic skill, which he had used up completely. His cultivation in the body path had risen from the 3rd phase to the 5th phase. Crossing from 3 to 4, there was a threshold similar to Chess Tao that required an inner connection to upgrade further. At that moment, following a prompt on the panel, the previously condensed chess heart could actually be embedded like a chess manual. Once the chess heart embedded into the body path cleared the hurdle, Li Hao's affection for chess skills did not diminish at all. On the contrary, although he had passed the mental barrier in the body path, he didn't develop any extra affection for it. Still feeling the usual about it, the panel could transfer state of mind, but it seemed unable to transfer the power of emotions. And when the body path reached phase 4, the many low-grade body refinement skills underwent a remarkable transformation, all evolving into higher-level techniques. Stone Skin 100 refinements transformed into Stone Skin 1000 refinements, and Barbarian Ox Strength into Bull Demon Barbarian Strength, enhancing the techniques and their effects, bringing significant improvements to the physical body. The other numerous inferior grade techniques did the same, causing all organs throughout his body to undergo new transformations and enhancements. Now, just in terms of physical strength, he had reached 80,000 caddies. While the several peak body refinement arts, even though there was no grade transformation, they had all entered the 4th layer. However, at the 4th layer, he encountered some peculiar issues. Merely depending on the energy of heaven and earth was no longer sufficient to meet the practice conditions of these peak body refinement arts. Even if his cultivation in the body path advanced to phase 5, he couldn't eliminate the external obligatory conditions. For example, to practice the 4th layer of 1000 Jiao's holy body, one must personally slay a Jiao dragon, capture its soul, and refine oneself, subduing and imprisoning its soul to break through the circulation realm and step into the soul succession realm. The dragon cicada void body was the same. The fourth layer, the dragon soul body, required a drop of true dragon blood to be completed without resolving external conditions, no matter how much physical comprehension he had. Even if he knew how to practice, it was like a skilled wife unable to cook without rice, with no solution at hand. Luckily, these two practice conditions were not difficult to meet for Li Hao. With just a word, Li Muxiu could resolve them in minutes. However, the methods of inheriting the soul in these two body refinement techniques were both unorthodox, and even if successful, they were considered mid-tier in the soul succession realm, not outstanding. The strength of the soul succession realm depends on the strength of the inherited heroic spirit's legacy. Thus, major powers still maintained their advantage in this regard, creating a vast gap from ordinary martial artists. Famous mountain grandmasters could let their direct disciples worship before the heroic spirit hall of their ancestors, and if lucky, receive the legacy of a heroic spirit ancestor, ascending in one step, which is considered top tier. After all, those capable of passing down heroic spirits were ancient old monsters from ages past, at least possessing the first realm existence that could defy the heavens and change fate. Such strength in Dayu could be counted on fingers. The inheritance from even a trace of their soul's will, like a key to a treasure trove, was immensely beneficial, whereas for martial artists without this background and heritage, unless they had extraordinary talents and took oath under a famous mountain, their only choice would be to inherit a soul from a martial temple. The heroic spirits in the martial temples were heroes of ancient times of varying strength, uneven and not all complete, dependent on the inheritor's own talents and disposition to see which heroic spirit would choose them. Lastly, there were the likes of Jiao dragons and mountain demons of lesser kinds. Such great demons were not stingy with their souls, but as their spirits were too weak, the inheritance they could offer was limited. Being born into the Li family, Li Hao had countless choices, among which the best option was to enter the ancestral hall of the Li family. There were the lineage's ancestral spirits worshipped from the first generation, that ancient divine general who opened the Dayu lands with Emperor Dayu, to the many generations that followed, including many top-tier powerhouses. Moreover, due to the connection by bloodline, inheriting the soul became easier, which was one of the reasons why martial arts noble clans remained powerful over ages. Heritage. What is heritage? It's the existence that can be passed down through layers. After successfully inheriting a soul in the Li family ancestral hall and continuing to practice the two peak body refinement arts, capturing the Jiao soul and the true dragon soul will merely strengthen himself, not allow him to ascend just by that. The difference is significant. However, before that, Li Hao planned to let his own accumulation deepen further. The control path, as he thought, corresponds to normal cultivation, qi, circulation skill, channeling veins, future soul succession realms, control of souls, and even the divine soul realm. Most likely all depend on the existence of the control path. With the understanding from the third phase of the control path, he practiced both of the Li family's top qi circulation skills to perfection. You should know, others, even if naturally gifted, would only dare to practice one, since each practice was equivalent to redoing the 10 layers of the circulation realm. But with the insight from the third phase of the control path, Li Hao moved smoothly through several practices and easily completed them, and the two top qi circulation skills, compared to the inherent qi circulation skills in the body refinement arts, had some differences which resulted in fewer overlaps than the two body refinement qi skills, causing a multitude of intermixing, hence leading to a rather exaggerated situation. Li Hao's qi circulation reached from 143 cycles to a lineage 248 cycles. Yes, to an extremely exaggerated extent, surpassing even the All Heavens Shou Tian skill of the Imperial family's 168 cycles by a whole 80 cycles. Chapter 37. When the cycle heaven realm reached perfection with 54 meridians, it meant an additional 4,320 cycles of strength, which was over 800,000 jin of colossal force. However, the royal family had access to the Dong Huang scripture Dais top meridian opening skill, capable of opening 62 meridians, adding 8 meridians of cycle heaven strength, which, when converted, provided only about 600,000 jin of extra force. But this was not Li Hao's limit. The Great Yin Channel was worth 10 meridians, equivalent to 2,480 cycles, which was close to 500,000 jin. In addition, the meridian opening skill that Li Hao practiced was not just the Dragon River Divine Meridian. The 9 Revolutions Starry Sky skill was also a meridian opening skill, along with 3 mid to high tier meridian opening techniques and several lower tier ones. However, those lower tier ones only opened the easiest meridians, which were already covered by the mid to high tier techniques, rendering them ineffective. But the 9 revolutions starry sky skill, combined with the 3 mid to high tier techniques, enabled Li Hao to open up major meridians not covered by the Dragon River Divine Meridian, bringing his total to 69 types of opened meridians. He had already surpassed the number of meridians opened by the Dong Huang scripture of the royal family. Li Hao was not yet satisfied. Currently, he planned to rely on his own physical insights to deduce the 4th layer of the primordial skill and break through the flawless body. The first chapter gathers the power of yin and yang from heaven and earth. The second layer encompasses the celestial stars. The third layer, the hard-to-notice mystic veins within the human body. For the 4th layer, I hope to open the Great Yang Meridian and combine the yin and yang channels. Li Hao's ideas were not whimsical. With the insights from the 5th stage of the physical body path, he considered himself half a grandmaster in body refinement. What is a grandmaster? It is someone who can create martial arts and establish their own schools. How the 4th layer of the original primordial should be cultivated, Li Hao did not know, nor did he need to. It was likely that the Li family had not been able to gather the complete scripture for years, and it had probably been destroyed, becoming dust in history. If that was the case, he would just continue writing a new chapter for this top-tier body refinement technique. Let the pearl no longer be covered in dust. Several days later, by the Blackwater Demon Lake, Li Hao sat outside the fishing terrace when suddenly an insight struck him. His blood chi surged, and bones beneath his skin subtly trembled. The chi force in his body danced back and forth within the 69 major meridians, eventually rushing with immense pressure to the crown of his head, almost causing his brain to burst. This was an exceedingly dangerous endeavor, but Li Hao's control over his body was extremely fine-tuned. He could even fold his ears shut and move each bone as flexibly as his fingers, exerting force at will. With a thunderous crash, his brain seemed to vibrate and he was assailed by waves of swelling and pain. Li Hao gritted his teeth and endured until that powerful chi force suddenly found an escape, rushing out before returning through the same gap, creating a cycle inside his body. A gleam of brilliant light shone in Li Hao's eyes, filled with excitement and agitation. At last, it was done. The Great Yin Channel was a wandering meridian, appearing randomly anywhere in the body at different times, making it extremely difficult to locate and control. Hence, it was called the mystic vein, also implying the elusive and mysterious. But the Great Yang Meridian was fixed, located inside the skull. Comparatively, the Great Yang Meridian was even more dangerous than the Great Yin Channel. Nobody dared to try opening it. Failure could result in idiocy or disability at best, or at worst, a burst skull leading to instant death. While a single meridian could account for the strength of 10, the enormous risk involved to gain just a little more power deterred 99% of people from attempting it, the reason being, almost all who had tried failed. Only certain martial arts fanatics and unrivaled geniuses would even consider engaging in such madness. Now, with the Great Yang Meridian opened, Li Hao instantly felt as if the mystic vein had found an anchor and no longer drifted around. Instead, it gradually approached the Great Yang Meridian, the two intertwining yin and yang combined. I shall call the 4th layer yin and yang no flawless body. Li Hao summoned the interface, and as his will commanded, the entry for primordial skill on the interface actually advanced to the 4th layer, named flawless body, minor accomplishment. He immediately circulated the yin and yang dual pulse, repeatedly transferring the chi force within his body to familiarize himself with the process. Soon, under the entanglement of yin and yang, a faint special vortex of power emerged through the swirl. Li Hao seemed to glimpse a golden light within his skull. He tried to reach it with his chi force, only to realize it was extremely distant, far beyond his grasp. Legend has it that there are a total of 108 major meridians in the human body. If all of them were opened, perhaps I might be able to touch that golden light, Li Hao thought as a sense of enlightenment washed over him. This was an insight from the physical body path, enriched by a wealth of cultivation memories, giving him an understanding of the body that was beyond ordinary people. Body refining is not simple, nor is it as unpromising as the elders said. On the contrary, Li Hao felt that the tiers of body refining techniques within Listening Rain Tower were inadequate. Even the 1,000 Jiao's holy body placed at the 6th floor could advance to the soul succession realm only by its 4th layer. And the other cultivation methods aimed directly for the top. There were multiple reasons why body refiners were not highly valued, including the difficulty of cultivation. Li Hao also believed the scarcity of techniques was a factor. If the techniques collected by the Li family were so few and far between, what about elsewhere? Li Hao looked at the interface. The previous flawless body minor accomplishment had now become great accomplishment. The intersection of the yin and yang dual pulse seemed to connect all the major meridians, allowing all the chi force to be instantly concentrated and orchestrated within, like erecting a dragon spine in the body. Li Hao tried it out and suddenly threw a punch with a whoosh. The punch whipped through the air like the roar of a tiger, actually pressing down the surface of the water several zhang ahead, creating waves and ripples 7 or 8 meters in diameter. If this punch had really hit solidly, it would have been like a cannonball hitting the water, bursting forth with a tremendous splash. Li Hao was slightly stunned and shock shone in his eyes, through the refined sensations of his flesh. He knew just how terrifying the power of his punch was. With the full strength of his major vessels condensed, his power had doubled. You should know that at this moment, with his yin and yang dual pulse condensed, and along with the 69 major vessels he had originally cultivated, it's as if he had 89 major vessels, with each vessel circulating 248 times. His Boda's strength had already reached 4.5 million gene. Under the doubled burst, it was close to 9 million gene. This was almost reaching the divine power of 10 million gene. And even a Zhou Tian realm true dragon wouldn't possess such fierce strength, even royal talents, wielding top-notch luck and the meridian opening skill, only have a strength of 2 million gene, unless they also activate 2 major vessels. If there's only one, they lack the ability to instantly condense the energy of all major vessels and unleash double the power. No wonder that uncle of mine is so terrifying, with both pulses converging to instantly double the strength. Too frightening. Li Hao murmured. Bright and peculiar lights burst forth in Li Hao's eyes. He dared not imagine how formidable it would be if all 108 vessels in his body were developed. You must realize, an ordinary martial artist at the Zhoutian realm would have only 20,000 gene of strength. Although that's the lower limit, the very lowest level of existence, 90% of warriors at the 10th layer of the Zhoutian realm had at least several 100,000 gene of strength. However, compared to Li Hao, the gap was still too vast. With my current strength, I could easily crush those elite cycle realm soldiers from the Yuan camp. Even at the 10th layer, Li Hao thought to himself, elite soldiers from the Yuan camp at 10th layer only had a massive strength of 500,000 gene. Appearing as mere children before him, royal talents were 4 times stronger than the soldiers from the Yuan camp, and he was 4 times stronger than those royal talents. Li Hao retracted his fist and regulated his breath, having just unleashed double the power of yin and yang. He felt a significant consumption of physical strength which was not sustainable for regular use. However, it was enough to deliver a fatal blow in a critical exchange. When his body had relaxed and recovered, Li Hao looked toward the demon lake but did not see second uncle's figure. He said he went to track the old dragon's trail in the demon lake. Who knows where he had ended up going? This demon lake stretched for thousands of miles, with deep waters, hiding a dragon demon inside. It really was hard to detect. At that moment, a faint movement suddenly transmitted over. Li Hao's ears twitched, and he quickly turned his head to look, only to see a snow-white figure swaying amidst the withered yellow leaves, as though hiding. He flashed over to the figure, and it turned out to be a snow-white little fox, similar in size to a newborn puppy. After taking a closer look, Li Hao saw that the little fox did not have any demonic aura. It seemed to be a common wild fox. Little guy, how did you get here? Where are your parents? Li Hao bent down and picked up the little fox from the leaves. The little fox's ears had a touch of orange-red, seeming like a mix between a white fox and a red fox. When Li Hao picked it up, it immediately struggled and pushed against his hands with its little paws. Li Hao placed it on his hand and looked around but did not see any sign of adult foxes. Perhaps the little thing had sneaked out from its nest. Seeing this, Li Hao put it back on the ground for its parents to find it. The little fox struggled in the leaves, too small to move swiftly or with agility. Li Hao smiled and paid it no more heed. Returning to the lake to continue fishing, before long, a figure flashed back. It was Li Muxio. Seeing that his hands were empty, Li Hao knew that the hunt for the dragon demon had failed. The old master had tried countless times over the past half-year, proving that the dragon demon was extremely cautious and cunning. To cultivate to a level that caught Li Muxia's attention, it must have lived for thousands of years at least. Seeing Li Hao's cheerful demeanor, Li Muxio snorted disapprovingly and said with a flick of his sleeve, "What about you, Air Force? Caught a small one in the power passage realm, said Li Hao with a hee-hee. Li Muxiu rolled his eyes, even more annoyed, as the sun set in the west. Li Muxiu, in a hurry, could only fish up a power passage realm fish demon to avoid the risk of returning empty-handed, and then took Li Hao back to Qinzhou City. Before leaving, Li Hao noticed that the little fox had crawled to a distant place and yet was still not found by its parents. He asked the old master to help check, only to find a pool of blood and some snow-white fox fur. After a search, from the looks of the scene, the adult fox had been eaten by some demon beast. Such occurrences were common in the wild. Li Hao sighed, found the little fox struggling to climb cluelessly around, and brought it back to Qinzhou City with him. In the yellowed fallen leaves of the mountain and river courtyard, a touch of snow-white was added henceforth. Chapter 38. Several months later, by the Blackwater Demon Lake, Li Hao hauled up a fish demon of the 8th layer of Zhou Tian realm, casually drew his sword to slay it, then set up a cauldron over a fire to cook, scaling, skinning. Deepeningi's movements were as fluid as drifting clouds and flowing water. This time, without adding spicy peppers, he prepared a nourishing soup, tossing in some wild mushrooms to cook together. The rich mushroom aroma drifted out with the steam from the edge of the iron lid, making the two elders fishing by the lake sniff the air and cast occasional glances as Li Hao announced, "Let's eat." The two elders materialized beside the cauldron like phantoms, each already holding their own eating utensils, a pair of exquisite jade chopsticks and a pair of rough ones made from tree twigs, simultaneously diving into the pot. Tsk, not bad. Li Muxiu slurped up a slice of fish and gave Li Hao a thumbs up. Old Master Feng also smiled as he served himself a bowl of fish soup, savoring it slowly. The contribution of this fish was significant, adding several dozen points to his cooking experience along with the fishing practices. Li Hao figured his cooking would be the first artistry to reach the third segment after chest tao. "Here, little guy, try some." Li Hao picked up a piece of fish and placed it on a nearby leaf, and a white figure darted out to nibble on it. "That's a fox, and you've raised it to be a dog?" Feng laughed. He had been back for several months now, and as for what he didn't tell Li Muxiu or Li Hao, and naturally they would not ask. "There's not much difference." Li Hao chuckled. Halfway through the meal, Li Hao felt the timing was right and said to Old Master Li Muxiu, "Second grandpa, I'm planning on breaking through to the soul succession realm soon. Do you have time to take me to the ancestral shrine?" Both elders paused with their chopsticks and turned to look at Li Hao. Li Muxiu inquired in astonishment, "You're going to break through to the soul succession realm? You've reached cycle heaven realm perfection?" Li Hao nodded. He had deliberately delayed mentioning this to the old master to avoid progressing too quickly, which might appear too shocking and outlandish. "Really? For real?" Feng Bopping put aside his eating and drinking altogether, staring at Li Hao in astonishment. He knew that even though the boy played around, he would never joke about cultivation, but at the age of 8, breaking through to the soul succession realm? That seemed a bit too far-fetched. "Your Dragon River Divine Meridian is at perfection already?" "Impossible, even if you disregard your disability in martial arts. Even your father didn't step into the soul succession realm until he was 9. Li Muxiu looked doubtfully at Li Hao, knowing he wouldn't make such a pointless joke, but still found it unbelievable. He had seen prodigies with shocking talent, like Li Juni, who also reached soul succession at 8.5 years old. Furthermore, that person was diligent, day and night, intelligent, and extremely hardworking, but Li Hao spent his days fishing with him. Sometimes they fished for an entire day. When did he have the time to cultivate? It's true, Li Hao felt he might have overestimated the old master's capacity to cope, but there was no turning back now, so he reluctantly carried on. "Could it be that your meridians have cleared on their own?" Li Muxiu scrutinized Li Hao. "Even though you have an extraordinary talent for body refinement, breaking through to soul succession would at least take 7 or 8 years, or even a dozen years to a lifetime. How can meridian opening perfection be achieved in just a short year?" "That's simple, just let the young lad show us," Old Master Feng intervened. Li Muxiu agreed with a nod. "Right, show me." "Fine then." Li Hao immediately stood up, away from the cauldron, then stirred his chi force, activating 54 major meridians throughout his body. With formidable chi waves surging all over, he briefly suppressed the concealment effect of the all-encompassing attributes, allowing the chi waves to burst forth from his body. Li Muxius and Feng Bopping's eyes went wide with disbelief. Li Muxius' reaction even more so as his chopsticks fell into the pot. He looked at Li Hao in a daze, slack-jawed. "Is it really true? As a 4-stands realm powerhouse, how could he be mistaken? 54 meridians, full and robust, a bona fide perfection of the perfect Zhou Tian realm. But the boy before him was only 8 years old. After a moment of being stunned, Feng Boping turned to look at Li Muxiu with a speechless expression. Your Li family really knows how to breed monsters. First, it was that kid Li Junyi, and now it's this one. If the other divine general mansions knew about this, they'd probably be green with envy and thoroughly scrutinize you guys. Li Muxiu had yet to snap out of his shock, just staring blankly at Li Hao. This wasn't just a freakish talent of perfect Shou Tian, it also revealed something else. Li Hao's meridians were unblocked. It meant that Li Hao was no longer a martial arts invalid, he could cultivate. And with such talent, he would definitely become the number one of the Li family's next 3 generations. Even considering the past 10 generations, this aptitude would unquestionably be the best. Countless thoughts swirled in his mind at that instant, and Li Muxiu suddenly felt a surge of guilt and self-reproach. Such a genius, and yet he had been leading him astray every day with trivial pursuits, eating, drinking, playing, fishing indiscriminately. Had he not severely hindered his progress? Second grandpa? Li Hao finished cultivating and noticed his second uncle lost in thought, so he reminded him. Li Muxiu came back to his senses, and the first thing he wanted to do was grab the chopsticks to maintain his composure, but they had already fallen into the soup. He couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh, then stared deeply at Li Hao. How did your meridians become so unblocked? It seemed to happen in a dream, Li Hao said. One day I had a dream, and in the dream I was cultivating. Suddenly, as I exerted myself, my whole body felt relaxed, and when I woke up, cultivation seemed extremely simple. I went through meridian opening without any obstacles. The 2 elders were speechless. Did you unblock it all in your sleep? You're surely speaking in your dreams now, but other than what Li Hao said, they couldn't find any other possibility. Could it be that this boy's previous meridian obstruction was a feigned obstruction? Feng Boping pinched his sharp white beard, pondering. I've heard that some martial arts invalids are temporary and some become unblocked suddenly during practice. He might be one of those. Maybe. Li Muxiu nodded. He had also heard of such a possibility, but the chances were extremely low. Now that this boy can cultivate, your Li family is truly impressive. A true dragon has fallen. Yet another one stands. Tisk tisk. Feng Boping couldn't help but express his admiration. Li Muxiu sighed and said, had I known it would be like this, I would have nurtured him properly. He has been wasting a lot of time hanging around with us. Li Hao was startled by these words, and quickly said, Elder, you aren't going to force me to cultivate from here on, are you? What do you mean, force you to cultivate? Li Muxiu said irritably, now that your meridians are unblocked, don't you want to properly cultivate and establish a great and illustrious reputation in the future? Stop joking around. Without a second thought, Li Hao hurriedly said, Second uncle, don't ruin me. I don't want to join the army and go to war. Life is too comfortable now. And fame and honors. A dog wouldn't even want them. Let whoever wants them have them. Li Muxiu was at a loss for words. Others would have been thrilled at the chance to become famous. But this kid, what nonsense was he talking about? Ha ha ha. Feng Boping burst into laughter. It seems this little scoundrel is nothing like Junyi. I think what he says is quite right. Fame? Youngsters have pursued fame since ancient times. But in the end, wealth and honors aren't for this world. Li Muxiu's expression shifted subtly, and deep down he felt as if a fishbone had pierced his heart, painfully stabbing him. Li Junyi had once emerged dazzlingly spectacular, but afterwards, like a shooting star, he briefly shone before falling rapidly. He looked at Li Hao, who was nervously watching him. Li Muxiu's heart felt like a flower being crumpled. If he sent this child to the battlefield, who could guarantee that he wouldn't become a second Li Junyi? Forget it. Li Muxiu sighed deeply and said, if you don't want to compete for fame, so be it from now on, just like old me. Stay at the Li family, live a life of leisure, and be an unknown old invalid. Feng Boping chuckled. Who dares say the fifth saint is unknown? Unless his mouth hasn't been knocked crooked by you yet. Li Muxiu shot him an annoyed look and said to Li Hao, from now on, when your parents hear the news and come looking, I'll set aside my old pride and take their scolding kid. Come and eat. After saying that, he flicked his finger and a pair of chopsticks flew out of the pot. He then pulled over a branch, peeled it to make chopsticks, and began eating, but it was noticeably less carefree and joyous than before. As if burdened with heavy thoughts, Li Hao breathed a sigh of relief. No matter what, as long as he could continue fishing with the old man, it was good. Although he could fish on his own, fishing at the Blackwater Demon Lake with the old man meant not only assured safety, but also the chance to catch big fish, which was a delightful prospect. Sitting by the pot, Li Hao continued eating. Second uncle, about the soul succession. Humph, eat up, and afterwards I'll take you there. Li Muxiu glanced at Li Hao and then started eating the fish vigorously. Li Hao felt at ease and began to eat and drink heartily. The Li family ancestral hall was located in the deepest part of the Divine General Mansion. Carved into a mountain slope, the security outside the mountain was tight, with warriors clad in heavy armor. But there were only fallen leaves on the steps leading up the slope, empty and silent. Outside the majestic and solemn ancestral hall on the flat square stood several large cauldrons with incense wafting from inside. Two figures descended from the sky, gliding toward the square in front of the ancestral hall, and then ascended the steps on foot evenly. Mushio, the old man, reigned in his usual playful demeanor and took on a calm expression as he led Li Hao up the steps with measured pace. Second brother, what brings you here? A calm voice came from inside, as tranquil as a placid lake. Just the voice itself seemed to settle one's myriad of thoughts. Li Hao looked inside and saw many ancestral tablets on display. Among them prominently stood a golden statue of the Li family's founding divine general, Li Tianyuan. Off to the side in front of the ancestral tablets was an old man with a long beard and eyebrows, sitting alone on a cushion with a chessboard placed before him, playing against himself, gently making his moves, of course. In bringing the younger generation over for the ancestors to take a look, Li Mushio said as he stepped over the threshold and entered. Upon hearing this, the old man slowly lifted his head, and as his gaze landed on Li Hao, who had just stepped through the threshold, his unfazed eyes revealed a hint of ripples. Soul succession? This child seems even younger than Junyi, second brother. You can't be joking, can you? Chapter 39. I can take a joke, but I dare not joke with my ancestors. Li Mushio spoke indifferently. The elder with long eyebrows slightly furrowed his brow, thinking indeed it was so, although his second brother was often casual. He was always very proper in this ancestral hall. He asked, could it be that this child appears young, yet he is 9 years old? 8 years old, 8 years old? The elder with long eyebrows was stunned. Waves of emotion rippled through his eyes. Are you saying he achieved perfect Zhou at 8 years old? Correct. Having said this, Li Mushio then walked to the cushion in front of the golden statue and kneeled down to worship. Hao, come here. After kowtowing 3 times, he called out softly while kneeling. Li Hao immediately walked to his side. Kneel down and kowtow to the ancestors. Li Hao did as he was told, kneeling on the cushion and kowtowing respectfully to all the spirit tablets in turn. Li Mushio lifted his head and spoke softly, Descendant Li Mushio, today I bring the junior here to listen to the teachings of our ancestors. Please bestow upon us the inheritance. As these words fell, the numerous spirit tablets above seemed to tremble slightly. Li Hao had finished his kowtowing when he looked up, only to see a series of spectral figures materializing before the spirit tablets, seated in the air. Some wore scholars' robes and white gowns, others were clad in heavy armor, and some even had half their bodies missing, wrapped only in a battle banner. Clearly, these were the ancestors of the Li family. TSK, another fine seedling indeed, perfection in the Zhu Tian realm, yet with a youth's bone structure, just over 8 years old, even mightier by 3 points compared to that little fellow 20 years ago. Who would have thought that the good fortune of my Li family in the past 100 years would be so thriving? We must caution those youngsters not to become arrogant, or else this child will be their lesson. The many spectral ancestors chatted and shared their opinions in gentle murmurs when Li Hao entered the ancestral hall. He had already temporarily retracted his myriad attributes, not sure if these ancestral spirits could ignore the concealing effects of myriad attributes. Still, it was better not to invite unnecessary trouble. This child is talented and clever. They'll not interfere, you grant it. With such talent, only ancestors like you are fit to bestow it. After some exchange, many of the ancestral shadows gradually faded once again, returning to the spirit tablets, leaving only 4 spectral figures still suspended above the tablets. They merely watched Li Hao quietly without speaking. The figure holding a spear was just about to speak when suddenly a burst of light emanated from the central statue of the golden body, as if coming to life. The other few shadows couldn't help but look over, immediately bowing their heads in a slight nod, while the rest of the spirit tablets also trembled slightly, emitting a nearly uniform voice. We pay homage to our ancestor in front of the golden statue. A figure with a tall stature and broad shoulders sat cross-legged, more substantial in form compared to the other shadows. His features were identical to the golden statue. If you can uphold my oath, you will receive my inheritance. The middle-aged man looked down at Li Hao, his expression gentle and tranquil, undisturbed by any ripple. Li Hao could feel the old man next to him trembling slightly, seemingly quite excited, and he also recognized the spectral figure to be the Li family's original ancestor. Li Tianyuan. We pay homage to our ancestor. Old Master Li Muxiu bowed his head and kowtowed. Li Hao immediately followed suit, imitating him. In my time, I followed Emperor Dayu in his campaigns, subduing countless demons and tribes throughout Dongwang. And I made 2 oaths to the emperor that have continued the Li family's glory for 1,000 years, spoke the spirit of ancestor Li Tianyuan. The first oath is that the people of the Li family shall vow to protect the Li family unto death through thick and thin. The second oath is to defend the Dayu dynasty to the death, to share the same fate with Dayu. Can you do this? After speaking, Li Tianyuan fixed his gaze on the Li Hao below. Li Hao looked shocked. Vow to protect the Li family to death? Did the Li family refer to certain people or everyone? The ancestral hall was deadly silent, with all eyes seemingly converged on the young child, waiting for him to speak. After a long silence, Li Hao finally spoke softly. Ancestor, forgive my dullness, for I am confused. Speak, the spirit of Li Tianyuan said. His expression serene. Does protecting the Li family mean everyone, including the branches of the clan? Li Hao asked carefully, does this protection imply safeguarding them, or does it mean I cannot harm them? You only protect the direct bloodline. Since it's protection, you naturally cannot harm them. Otherwise, if you chop off their limbs and leave them just a breath, it could still be considered protection, stated Li Tianyuan. Clearly indicating the severity of the oath, Li Hao asked, then what if there are traitors in the family's direct line, or if someone schemes against me? Such degenerates, you can hand them over to those who haven't entered the ancestral hall to continue their souls, but if such degenerates attack or ambush me first, wouldn't I only be able to hide? Li Hao spoke, he who inherits my soul within the same realm excluding the royal family shall be invincible. Li Tianyuan said indifferently, if you wish to avoid them, it is effortless. If you encounter those above your realm, you just need to flee for your life. There's no need for unnecessary heroics. What if they die in front of me while I stand by and do nothing? You must intervene to save them, even if they are unworthy, Li Tianyuan said. However, when the unworthy face justice, you may choose to be absent, so your heart's oath will not be broken and you won't be hurt. Li Hao thought for a moment. That could indeed be a solution, but that seems a bit unfair, doesn't it? As a prodigy, encountering a Li family peer in the same realm, he could only hide away. Even if the other party faces misfortune and he witnesses it, he still has to help? That seems rather unreasonable. Stop talking nonsense. Li Muxius' expression changed slightly and he promptly whispered to Li Hao. Li Tianyuan's heroic spirit, however, did not get angry but calmly looked at Li Hao and slowly said, indeed, it is not fair. But do you know why I would have talents eligible to succeed the ancestral spirits in the family shrine endure such injustices and make such heart's oaths? The Li family indeed has a family shrine and many ancestral heroic spirits, but not every member of the Li family is eligible to inherit these spirits. Their standards are quite high. Li Hao shook his head. I don't know, it is for continuation. Li Tianyuan spoke slowly. The first heart's oath is to prevent gifted members of the family from becoming spoiled and arrogant, disregarding the lives of the ordinary and mediocre within the clan, even to the point of breaking away from the family after ascending with the resources of the clan and seeking their fortune recklessly. Therefore, this restriction may seem unfair to the talented, but at most it is a minor grievance, yet the benefit is that it can sustain the family, passing down the legacy from generation to generation. Li Hao thought it over. From the perspective of the ancestors, this was indeed the case, and the Li family's 1,000-year existence, unextinguished and not feared by the royal family, is due to the second heart's oath. Li Tianyuan spoke calmly. Originally, there were 12 divine generals who campaigned with the founding emperor. Now, in the Dayu Divine General Mansion, there are only 5 seats, of which 2 rose in recent hundreds of years. The descendants of those old fellows from the past have long been obliterated by the sands of time, and the remaining ones have concealed their identities, their whereabouts unknown. These 2 heart's oaths may seem like restrictions, like chains, but in reality, they are for the continuation of the bloodline. Otherwise, with the Li family's 1,000 years of accumulated military merits, its connections, the number of generals, and the prestige within the army, how could the royal family dare to empower them so readily, and why wouldn't they use imperial skill to weaken and harm us? Hearing this, Li Hao was momentarily stunned. From the perspective of this old ancestor, it had indeed been achieved. The benefits outweighed the drawbacks. For a divine general lineage to continue for 1,000 years with just a casual remark, its difficulty was beyond what ordinary people could imagine. Perhaps it was because the royal family knew that the Li family's top talents would inherit the ancestral spirits in the family shrine and had these 2 heart's oaths, that they allowed the Li family its current glory. Now that you are fully aware, are you willing to make the heart's oaths? Li Tianyuan asked calmly yet earnestly. Li Hao pondered and remained undecided. still unsure of what to do. He always felt that these two hearts' oaths were like a curse upon the Li family. Though they ensured 1,000 years of glory, were they not also a tight shackle? Generations of honor, this hall full of heroic spirits. 6 out of 9 in the previous generation dying in battle. How many in each generation died a natural death? Instead, those ordinary members within the family seemed to be mostly protected and able to enjoy their old age. Being a prodigy in the Li family, it seemed more of a misfortune, because they had to bear the weight of the entire Li family on their shoulders. In this case, it would be better to inherit the spirit from a martial temple, at least to be free and easy. Li Tianyuan seemed to discern Li Hao's hesitation, a trace of coldness flashing in his eyes, and then his figure gradually faded away, leaving only his echoing voice. This child is talented but lacks determination. Let him consider it further. The other memorial tablets quivered slightly as if to bid farewell to the ancestor before also becoming silent. Li Muxiu was taken aback. Then, looked at Li Hao helplessly but did not say more in front of the ancestral tablets instead. He stood up with a deep bow and then led Li Hao out of the family shrine. Seeing this, Li Hao felt an inexplicable sense of relief and followed Elder Muxiu out before leaving. His gaze involuntarily glanced at the chessboard. He couldn't help it, possessing a chess heart, as Jian Wudao once said, among 1,000 weapons, a lover of swords will see the sword first. That is only the stage of affection, let alone when it takes hold of the heart among 10,000 things. Li Hao would notice the chessboard at first glance. Elder, black piece on the 7th line, 13th spot. Can win, he said after speaking. Li Hao followed his second uncle out of the family shrine outside. It seemed to have started to drizzle, a thin, unending rain. Li Muxiu sighed. It was the perfect time for fishing, with the lake assimilating fresh water and the demon fish liking to come up for air. But at the moment, he was not in the mood. Don't overthink, just reflect on it yourself. Li Muxiu knew Li Hao was playful, unwilling to be bound, and couldn't talk him into it. The boy was too young and occasionally willful. Li Hao nodded. The elder himself had inherited the spirit in the family shrine, which showed that, despite seeming carefree, he was deeply concerned for the Li family. Inside the shrine, the old man with the long eyebrows withdrew his gaze. He was not familiar with Li Hao, nor did he care how Hao felt, since he would come back eventually. As his eyes fell back on the chessboard, his fingers gently pinched a piece, about to make a move when he suddenly let out a soft exclamation. Chapter 40. A year later, by the edge of Blackwater Demon Lake, the aroma of fish soup wafted into the air. The two elders sat next to a large pot with their bowls and chopsticks, and Feng Bopping followed the customary sip of soup before eating. He scooped up a spoonful of fish soup and slowly savored it, not being able to help but exclaim. This kid's cooking skills could almost rival those of the Imperial Kitchen TSK. I've been eating it for a year and still haven't gotten tired of it, which is really strange. Li Muxiu was also surprised. He had not expected Li Hao to possess such remarkable culinary talent, a skill that was getting better and better. Feng, have you ever eaten from the Imperial Kitchen? Li Hao asked with a smile. I've stolen a taste. Feng Bopping's face, though aged, bore a hint of a mischievous smile, reminiscing as he smacked his lips, that half a bowl of leftover soup even had my saliva in it. I wonder which concubine ended up with it. You old thief, if you had served it to Emperor you would have lost your head, Li Muxiu said, clearly not amused. He had some understanding of his old friend's audacious escapades and found them incredibly bold. Li Hao couldn't help but laugh. He knew the Saint of Thieves spared nothing and no one. Last time, the old man even tried to give him a silk scarf thin as a cicada's wing, supposedly used by some sex saintess. It was only when his second elder chased the old man down half a river with a shoe that he gave up on gifting the scarf. This had become one of Li Hao's regrets. He felt that sometimes the second elder meddled a bit too much. Life's pleasures must be fully enjoyed. After all, you have to try everything, Feng Bopping said. Cheerfully, Li Hao also picked up his bowl and began to eat. Listening to the elder's banter, suddenly, an idea struck him and words appeared before his eyes. You have comprehended the spirit of cooking. Li Hao's eyes glinted briefly before returning to normal, the revelation falling within his expectations, since his cooking skill reached the 3rd tier at the fastest speed. He had sought ways to deepen his involvement, often visiting the kitchen to communicate and learn from the chefs. These chefs, upon meeting Li family's young master, the favored genius, dared not neglect him. Though the matter was extremely odd, They were completely open and exhaustive in sharing their knowledge with Li Hao through deep conversations with the chefs. Li Hao's horizons had broadened immensely. He learned of the vastness of the culinary arts, which were no less nuanced than chef's tao, an array of ingredients, various seasonings, heat control, culinary techniques, removing fishiness, and countless other methods. These revelations gradually made Li Hao fall in love with cooking, exploring it like a vibrant new world unconsciously. He moved beyond the phase of cooking for experience and genuinely grew fond of the culinary arts. Even without the incentive of gaining experience points, he would take opportunities to show off his cooking by preparing various dishes. Lately, with the confectionaries being delivered to mountain and river courtyard, he would taste each carefully. If they were made poorly, he would even overturn them and call the cook responsible to offer his personal criticism. Once it entered his heart, he inevitably became earnest and strict, just like casual gamers in video games who wouldn't mind losing, but those who would rage upon defeat were usually the ones who seriously sought victory. Now, with the prompt of having comprehended the spirit of cooking, Li Hao didn't feel too overjoyed. After dedicating himself to something, he became indifferent to the outcomes as it had been with his earlier understanding of chess spirit. Nevertheless, with this state of mind, he could now attempt to break through to the fourth stage of control path. The three chatted leisurely. Finishing their meal and drinks, Li Hao picked some choice bones to feed to the little white fox by his side. The little white fox was 1.5 years old, still petite and delicate, its coat lustrous, snow-white. Li Hao had been feeding its spirit fruits infused with medicinal properties along with its daily fish soup, setting it on a path of cultivation. Reaching the 5th level of Power Passage Realm, from a wild fox in the mountains, it was now halfway to becoming a demon, with a slight demonic aura. If it could reach the Zhou Tian realm, it would develop spiritual intelligence. Demons in the Soul Succession realm could already appear and vanish like ghosts. After finishing lunch, they went fishing for the afternoon. However, Li Hao only caught one fish demon at the 2nd layer of Zhou Tian realm. His luck in fishing was not good today. After packing up, he returned to Listening Rain Tower carrying the little white fox. Li Hao went back to mountain and river courtyard and shut himself in his room. Only then did he reveal his panel and, after some consideration, decided to use his new state of mind for a breakthrough in control path soon. His control path progressed from the 3rd to the 4th stage. The 3rd stage of control path had enabled rapid progress in opening his channels. And, now at the 4th stage, he wondered whether he would gain new insights into the major channels and the chi circulation skill. As he finished allocating points, a rush of information flooded his mind. After a while, Li Hao slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were clear and bright, with a hint of astonishment. The world he saw seemed to have undergone some marvelous changes, and the deep insights in his mind told him that this universe was far more wonderful than what he had seen before. The world was alive with spirit. Demons and monsters gain insight from the stars, the sun, and the moon. Soul succession, with the blessing of the soul's intention, inherits not only the soul's intent but must also abide by certain agreements humans may inherit from other humans, from demons, or from myriad races. Likewise, humans can also receive the inheritance of myriad races, the spirits of mountains and specters, the legacies of true dragons and phoenixes, or even the inheritance of the stars, the sun, the moon, and the very earth itself. Seeing many martial arts secrets within Listening Rain Tower, and with his own numerous cultivation methods, Li Hao suddenly felt an epiphany. To inherit from humans, one must carry on their intentions. To inherit from demons, one must carry on their nature, but to inherit from the heaven and earth, one must carry on their profundity. I will establish my soul with heaven and earth. Li Hao's eyes blazed with intense light. He activated his myriad attributes, enveloping his flesh. Unless he himself made a large commotion with his punches and kicks, others would not be able to detect it. Then, the chi force in his body surged through his major channels, with the yin and yang dual pulse emerging, converging at the top of his head in an instant. His Buddha strength crazily surged, containing a terrifying force within. This force seemed as though it would burst forth from his body, breaking through that elusive barrier of nothingness. He wanted to connect with heaven and earth, to question the sky, the earth, and borrow that bit of strength. As if sensing Li Hao's intense will, a vast and terrifying pressure enveloped him like an actual mountain crashing down, causing all his bones to crackle with stress. Some unable to bear the weight of the world, heavier than Mount Tai. Li Hao's eyes reddened, and he roared in his heart. The terrifying power of the yin and yang dual pulse erupted, and in an instant, his chi force doubled, reaching nearly 10 million caddies. That boundless willpower seemed to be lifted up by sheer force. But then, it was heavily suppressed again. Li Hao's body bent, and his feet deeply embedded into the floorboards. He clenched his teeth, knowing that relying solely on chi force was not enough, as he had not glimpsed the essence of heaven and earth. What were the true features of heaven and earth? It's the sky, the white clouds, the mountains and rivers, the myriad things on earth, all parts of the world, but not the complete picture of the world. And he needed to stand his soul upon heaven and earth. What form would that world take in his heart? In Li Hao's mind emerged a Buddhist martial art from the 7th floor of the Listening Rain Tower, within which there was a line of Buddhist scripture: Buddha has no form. If even the Buddha has no form, how could heaven and earth have a form? I stand within this world, I am the form reflected by this world. A sudden burst of light exploded in Li Hao's eyes. His spirituality and chi force seemed to surge out together, breaking through an invisible checkpoint and reaching directly into the world. All of his chi force gathered and condensed his essence, energy, and spirit above his body, vaguely manifesting a shadow that was his own likeness, establishing his own form as the form of the world, establishing his soul with the world as its foundation. At that moment, Li Hao stepped into the soul succession realm. It seemed an endless strength flowed through the world, through the voids in all directions, pouring into his body. Every curtain in the room was shaking violently. Yet the doors and windows were shut. Where was this wind coming from? In the courtyard within the pavilion, as Li Hao embarked on his cultivation, Li Fu no longer followed him like a shadow, but they still resided in the same courtyard. At this moment, he was playing chess in the courtyard, not because he enjoyed it, but because Li Hao once strongly invited him, teaching him, so that now in his leisure it seemed the only pleasure he could find. He was engrossed in a game with Zhao, fighting a battle across the chessboard. If Li Hao were to see the game, he would only have one comment: amateurish pecking. Suddenly, both men seemed to pause in their move, involuntarily looking toward a certain direction. An inexplicable sense of shock, as though something magnificent was awakening, filled them with astonishment, as if it was the misconception of a divine premonition. What was this thing? The next moment, both stopped their game and rushed towards Li Hao's room, for an abnormal event surely meant the presence of a demon. As they burst through the door in haste, they saw the room in disarray, with vases that sat on the edge of shelves already fallen and shattered on the floor, and there was Li Hao, his legs embedded in the wooden planks, breathing faintly as if he had practiced a vigorous technique. What's going on? Seeing that there was no ambush, the two men relaxed and immediately hastened to Li Hao's side. Li Hao had already calmed the impact of the power from entering the soul succession realm, and myriad attributes hid his extraneous aura. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, Li Hao exhaled and said, "I was just practicing. You brat, why not go practice in the courtyard?" Li Fu said irritably, yet without suspicion. Li Hao's body refinement in the Zhou Tian realm was hardly a secret, and he was aware of it, although the specific details were unclear to him. "I just had a sudden insight," Li Hao explained. "Well, that's quite good." Zhao laughed. Although the vases on the floor were centuries old and quite precious, as long as Li Hao made progress in his training, everything was worth it. Having reassured the two men, Li Hao continued to savor the power of the soul succession realm in his room, which was far superior to the Zhou Tian realm. No wonder it was said that only those who reached the soul succession realm were eligible to be the guardians of a city, and at this moment he was only 9 years old, yet already capable of commanding a city. After entering the soul succession realm, Li Hao's life remained as usual. Day by day, he ate and drank, either going out fishing, drawing, or playing chess in the courtyard, or running to the kitchen to cook. As time went by, the young master started coming up with new ideas, learning poetry and playing the qin, seemingly ever more determined to drift away from proper pursuits. Time flew by, spring went and autumn came. In the blink of an eye, 5 years had passed, the Qingyuan era. Year 14. That year, Li Hao turned 14.